All right, we need to talk about a story coming out of the Philippines that is, well, it's really something else. It's this wild mix of faith, big-time politics, and a truly mind-boggling number of animals. It's got everyone talking, and for good reason.
At the very heart of this whole thing is one number, 100.
You heard that right. 100 cattle.
And yep, all of them for one single event in Davos City. So you have to be asking, what on earth is actually going on here? Okay, so before we dive into all the controversy, and believe me, there's a lot of it, let's just lay out the basic facts, the stuff that pretty much everyone agrees happened. So, the event was officially called Pray for the Philippines. It took place on September 21st in Davao City, and the main figure leading it all was Vice President Sara Duterte. But as you're about to see, this was no simple prayer meeting. No, this was a massive citywide operation. I mean, we're talking over 500 security personnel on the ground. They shut down multiple major streets downtown. They had 80 traffic enforcers whose only job was to reroute vehicles. And they started setting everything up, barricades and all, at 1 o'clock in the morning. This was a huge commitment of public resources.
And all of this brings us back to that central image, the 100 cattle. Why? What does a sacrifice on this scale even symbolize? Well, it turns out there are two wildly different ways to look at it. So, the official explanation frames this as a deeply religious act. Vice President Duterte said the cattle offering represents a collective prayer for deliverance and blessing. It's being compared to a biblical act, like a sacred offering to protect and bless the entire city. But then you have the other side. For critics, this isn't a sacred offering at all. It's pure political theater. They're not even calling it prayer. They're using words like cult choreography, calling it just a prop in a much bigger political drama.
One critic put it really bluntly, calling the whole thing pageantry bordering on grotesque, and they said it looks medieval. You know, that word really paints a picture, doesn't it? It suggests something that feels completely out of another time. And the controversy doesn't stop with the spectacle. There's also a big debate about the real intention behind all these prayers. Who or what was this really for?
It seems like a simple enough question, right? But the answer is where you can really see the political currents running underneath everything.
Publicly, the prayers were for the whole country, for national peace and prosperity. But it was also openly stated that the prayers were for the eventual freedom of the vice president's father, former President Duterte, from the International Criminal Court. And well, that's where the lines get really blurry between a prayer for the nation and a rally for one family's legal issues.
But the political layers just keep on coming. For a lot of critics, the single most provocative detail of this entire event was the date they chose to hold it on.
See, September 21st is not just another day on the calendar in the Philippines. It's the anniversary of the 1972 Declaration of Martial Law, which kicked off one of the darkest periods in the country's history. So choosing to hold this specific rally on that exact day, that is seen as a very powerful and deeply controversial statement. In fact, critics are calling it a narrative hijack. The argument is that this was a deliberate attempt to try and overwrite a solemn, painful day of remembrance with a new celebration, one dedicated to the Duterte political dynasty.
So, when you pull all these different threads together, what you're left with are two completely opposite stories being told about the very same event. They can't both be true.
So what was it? Was it a sacred act of faith, or was it a cynical political show? A prayer for the whole nation's deliverance, or just propaganda for one powerful family? A divine offering, or a kind of cult-like performance? How you answer those questions probably depends entirely on which narrative you believe. Maybe the most memorable and pointed criticism I saw framed it like this, that this wasn't a humble prayer, but, quote, a hostage note to God, signed in barbecue sauce and Sara Duterte's desperation. In the end, this whole 100 cattle rally leaves us with a question that goes way beyond this one event. In our public spaces, where is the line between an act of public faith and a political performance? And maybe the even bigger question is, who gets to decide where that line is drawn?